Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 10. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an Am Law 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are talking about your brain on law. What does that mean? So part of what we're going to be talking about is the neuroscience behind our brains and how we can actually change them. And even though this probably isn't neuroscience, it's some of my speculation on how law school and being a practicing lawyer has also changed our brains and what we can do about it. All right, so the legal brain. There is so much discussion about, is it nature or is it nurture? Is there a certain kind of personality that is drawn to law school naturally? Or is it that we just get to law school and then we are brainwashed? I have no idea. What I do know is that Dr. Larry Richard, a lawyer and a psychologist, someone whom I greatly admire and have had the pleasure of working with, he says that we do, for the most part, seem to have some similarities. And he has worked with a ton of lawyers and has tested a lot of lawyers and has found that, one, we are a highly skeptical group, more so than the average person or business person. And on top of that, we take things very personally. Which might be surprising because lawyers are supposed to be very thick-skinned and aggressive, and on the outside they may show that. But apparently we internalize things much more than we let on. So we are very judgmental, we're very skeptical, and we take things very personally, which means we are full of drama in our minds all the time, and we often hold that in our bodies. You can just feel the tension in your back and your shoulder blades and even your jaw. For me, it's an eye twitch. Anytime I get really stressed out or frustrated, I get this eye twitch. And oftentimes, it's not because of the amount of work I'm having to do or physical exertion. It's because I am letting what's happening around me get the best of me. And indeed, I am internalizing it. And I've not had any guests on the show yet, but perhaps I will. I would love to have Dr. Richard on. We could go into this in more detail. But what I know is we do have common symptoms, I'll call them symptoms, or personalities that are not typical among the average population. I personally believe that part of that is because of law school. It is a fear-based program, and it starts with the Socratic method. So we start to wonder, am I going to know the answer when I'm called on? Am I going to look stupid? Am I going to get on the dean's list, or what's my rank going to be? And then it's, will I get an interview with the firms that matter? Will I get a summer associate position? Will I not screw it up? Will I get the job? Will I wear the right outfit? And then, will I pass the bar? Am I going to miss a deadline? Am I going to commit malpractice? It never stops. There's this constant fear that we're not going to be good enough, or that we're going to totally screw everything up. And I don't think that goes away. I think part of it is because we get so overworked that we then get stressed out, and we're always, a lot of times, seeing the worst that can happen in a situation. And so we automatically assume that the worst is going to happen to us. So I think we live in this constant state of fear. And it may be, low-lying, but it's always there, about to bubble at the surface at any given moment. And I think we've seen the stats, right? I mean, attorneys tend to be more stressed out and anxious than the average population. We have higher divorce rates, more alcoholism, drug use, suicide. So it's a real thing. And It's something that we have to talk about and focus on. And if you're familiar with my story, maybe you listened to episode 1, I had a bit of a mental breakdown myself. And it was partly because I was always living in this overworked, stressed out, fear-based system. And as I also shared in episode 1, I started really searching out a lot of different tools to start to help once I, had kind of hit my breaking point. And one of the things that has really changed my life is meditation. And that's what I want to talk about today. I'm not going to share so much, how you go about meditating or starting a meditation practice, but I do want to share with you the science behind meditation, and not only your brain on law, but your brain on meditation. Because I know you're skeptical, I want to give you the facts. I want to give you the research so that you can at least be open to hearing about how meditation might be able to help you. So if you find that you have a really hard time turning off your mind, if you have a hard time relaxing, maybe you find it difficult to have perspective and not be on edge all the time. If your phone buzzes and you kind of jump because you're worried about, what's going to be there, I think meditation might be able to help you. So continue to listen, even if you're skeptical and you're like, oh, that's what this is about. I'm going to share with you some research, some science, and then I'll share some resources, basically, if you want to give it a go, even if you've tried it before and it didn't work. So my experience with meditation, I'm not really sure when I first tried it, but I definitely, probably gave it a go a few different times from college to when, I had my mental breakdown in 2010. And it never really worked for me. I mean, I really enjoyed Savasana at the end of yoga. I didn't really realize that that was meditation. I kind of just thought it was a nap at the end of yoga. I mean, it felt restorative and relaxing, but I don't know that I really appreciated what it was or what I was supposed to be doing. And when I thought of meditation and what I had been given to practice before was basically you close your eyes and you focus on like your breathing, your nostrils, and you were just supposed to shut off your mind. And that did not work at all for me. The other type of meditation that I had tried, it's the concept of when like you try to fill your body with light, like a good light's coming in and like a bad dark light is going out throughout your whole body. And that never really worked for me either. I had tried it, but I didn't really see the benefit of it. So I had tried it a few times over the years, but didn't really think much about it. But when I was really struggling and thought there has to be a better way to deal with life and the stresses that come along with a legal career, I kept hearing over and over and over again that I should really try to meditate. And of course, I too was skeptical and reluctant at first, but I finally said, okay, I'll try it out. Now, let me start by saying I am not a naturally easygoing person. This is called hustle and flow. Hustle comes easy to me. I know how to do that in my sleep. Flow takes a lot of work, a lot of focus, and a lot of concentration. And quite frankly, I think that's why I'm so good at teaching it, because I get you. I get that it is probably hard for you to relax and to shut off your mind. So I have tried a ton of different techniques, and I think I understand better than most some of your difficulties in trying to meditate. So here was the first big obstacle for me, and I think it comes up for a lot of attorneys, and that is that if we're not good at something, if we just can't do it easily and do it well, we give up on it pretty quickly. We're like, not interested. And for whatever reason, we think that if we can't sit down and immediately meditate, that it's just not for us. But meditation is like anything. It requires practice. You don't go into a gym and say, oh, well, I can't exercise because I'm overweight. Well, that's the very reason why you probably need to be exercising. Yet with meditation, we say, well, I can't meditate because I can't turn my mind off. Well, that's the very reason why you need to be meditating. I don't know why we go in circles on these kinds of things, but we do. And just like exercise, when you go in there the first few times, if you've, been out of it for a while, it seems so difficult. But a few months in, when you've, got a regular practice going, it's so much easier. I mean, you still get a good workout, but it just doesn't seem nearly as daunting and difficult. Like, at least you know the moves. At least you've got the form down. When you first start out, just everything is off and it feels terrible. Well, meditation's kind of the same way. You have to decide on the front end that you want to give it a go and you really want to try and make it work, because I'm confident that everyone can learn to meditate if they want to. It's really a matter of willpower. Do you want to do this for yourself or not? And just as exercise helps your physical body, meditation helps your mind. I think both are pretty good to just release stress, but meditation does something very different than exercise. And a lot of people try to say, well, I don't meditate, but I exercise. They're doing two totally different things. They can both help you release stress, but meditation does so much more than that. And we're going to get to that in just a second. The second excuse or objection that I had that I also hear from a lot of attorneys is, I don't have time. I just don't have time for this. Well, if you don't have time for it, you really need it. This goes back kind of to the exercise. Even if you're just practicing 5 minutes a day, it will start to help. It's just like exercise, right? Like, you don't have to go straight to, I'm going to exercise an hour a day, 7 days a week when I've not exercised in the last 5 years. It's the same for meditation. Don't think that you're just going to suddenly meditate every morning for 30 minutes in this blissful state 7 days a week. No, maybe you're just setting aside 5 minutes a day, or maybe it's 10 minutes a day during a break at work or at lunch, or maybe it is in the morning or night for you. But you don't have to go crazy to begin with. You can build up those muscles, build up your tolerance. So we all have 5, 10, 15 minutes every day. So that's not a valid excuse. And then last, my third excuse and objection was, look, this is just some hippie hogwash. I mean, I am a sophisticated lawyer, for goodness sake. Why am I going to go try to meditate when that's not who I am? I mean, I have as much in common with a Tibetan monk as a kindergarten teacher. For the record, my sister's a kindergarten teacher. Talk about nature versus nurture. I don't know how we came out so differently, but I digress. I was just really skeptical and judgmental of something that I did not understand. And I hear this a lot from attorneys too. And that's why I want to share with you today some research from Sarah Lazar from Harvard. Sarah is a neuroscientist, and she researches how meditation impacts and changes the brain. Now, meditation has been around for thousands and thousands of years, mostly in Eastern traditions and cultures. And I think, quite frankly, that's probably, an implicit bias here in the U.S., part of why we pushed that away. It was from a different culture. It was from something we didn't understand. And perhaps, it did not coincide with our religious beliefs. So it wasn't really until the late 1950s or early 1960s that there started to be some meditation practice in the U.S. And it really was mostly from hippies. But a lot of others started to get the benefit from it. And of course, they did what any good American would do. They said, well, we need some research on this. And so Sarah was one of those people that ended up in a yoga class because she had gotten injured, I think, training for a half marathon. Okay, there is a theme here. If you have heard my story, I just caught onto that. So Sarah ended up in a yoga class and they told her she was going to be able to, have more compassion for others and, just be able to relax more easily. And she was like, this is crazy. But then she started to experience those effects. And she thought, well, maybe it's just a placebo effect. She got interested in it. So then she started researching it. And I'm going to share with you her findings today. Now, she is not the first one to start doing this kind of research. I think most of it really came out of UCLA before that, but there had already been some research that showed that yoga and meditation decrease stress, reduce symptoms of depression, anxiety, even physical pain, and that there was an ability to pay better attention to what you're working on, and then just a general increased quality of life. So people just reported feeling happier and better. And what she wanted to do was look at it from a neurological perspective. They had already been doing some MRI scans to look at changes in the brain, and they had already come out with the concept of neuroplasticity, which is basically, the way I understand it, the ability to change and train the brain over time. So with repeated experiences, you might actually increase or decrease your gray matter. And the neurons that are basically, it's speaking to each other. It's like the information highway of the brain. That too can change, we'll say, course or direction based on, for example, having a traumatic experience or experiencing something over and over and over again. So we're always looking for shortcuts in the brain. And the idea of neuroplasticity is you don't just develop it as a child and it never changes. It can change over time, whether you intend it to or not, just based upon repetitive experiences. So they had already been scanning the brain to do studies to see what can impact and change the brain over time. But she really was the first to step in and start doing these neurological imaging just for the sole purpose of looking at how does meditation and yoga impact the brain. So in her first study, they took a group from the Boston area and they took people that meditated 30 to 40 minutes per day, as well as a group that did not meditate at all. They had no experience meditating. And they tried to make sure that the groups had similar demographics. The only thing that was different was whether or not they had a daily meditation practice or they did not. And so they simply scanned the brains of both groups. And what they found was that the Boston meditators had more gray matter in the areas of working memory and making decisions. And it was so noticeably different that they even saw that the 50-year-old meditators had the same memory functions as the 25-year-old non-meditators. Did you hear that? I'm going to repeat that one again because that's wild to me. The 50-year-old meditators had the same gray matter for memory as the 25-year-old non-meditators. So that was really exciting for them because they started to wonder, can meditation actually help slow down cognitive deterioration as you age? Now, as Sarah admits, there were a lot of skeptics out there that said, again, this is very similar to nature versus nurture. Maybe the group that you had that were meditating, maybe they were predispositioned to already feel that way. Maybe because their brains were already wired in that way, that's why they were meditating in the first place, right? Like they were just naturally drawn to it. And so they decided to address that objection. So in their second study, they took a group that had never meditated before, right? So basically it would be like taking that non-meditating Boston group. And that's the only group that they were going to work with, but they split that up. So the control group was a group that had never meditated, and they scanned their brains at the beginning. And then 8 weeks later, they scanned their brains again, right? They're not meditating at all at any point. And then they took half of the group, again, similar demographics. They had never meditated before, and they put them through an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction training, which involves meditation. And they told those participants, we want you to meditate based on how we're teaching you to do this, 30 minutes every single day for 8 weeks. And so they also scanned that group's brains at the beginning and then at the end of the 8 weeks. And the results were drastic and amazing. So their brains were very similar, the two groups at the very beginning. There really weren't too many differences. And then at the end of the 8 weeks, the group that was not meditating, their brains didn't really change much at all. But the group that had been meditating for 8 weeks, they had a lot of changes. So they had increased gray matter in the areas that assist with learning, memory, regulation of emotions, perspective, empathy, and compassion. And there were decreased areas related to depression and PTSD. They also found that the amygdala had decreased. Now, the amygdala is basically your fight or flight. It is the part of your brain that is supposed to assess and identify fears for you, right? Like, we should be afraid sometimes. There are reasons to legitimately be afraid, and your amygdala is in charge of getting you the heck out of Dodge of those dangerous situations. The problem that they found over the years through some other research is that, especially with Americans, like, our amygdalas get hijacked on a regular basis, and for things that are not even real, like just a simple deadline or that buzzer on your phone with a new email coming in is triggering our amygdala, which creates all kinds of stress in your body and releases cortisone. I could go on and on. But what they found in this research was that the amygdala actually decreased. So suddenly you were able to be more responsive and realistic about fears, as opposed to constantly reacting just out of habit. And so 8 weeks of meditation had helped people calm down. And they reported that too. So that's another part of the study. They also asked people just at the beginning, how do you feel? How stressed out are you? And then they asked them at the end, and they all responded that they felt so much better. And, you know, what they were trying to prove and succeeded doing was to show that not only did the people feel better, their brains had actually changed. And here's where it gets really good. Not a single thing changed about their situations. Their jobs were still just as stressful. The economy was terrible when they did it. Nothing changed. The stress was still there, but their response to it was different. And they're continuing to do more and more research, and it's showing that you don't even need 30 minutes a day for 8 weeks to see results. And I've not had my brain imaged. I have no idea, but I can tell you personally that I am a much calmer, more peaceful person. I too have a ton more empathy and compassion than I ever did before. And I'm able to see things more clearly. I'm not nearly as reactive as I used to be. I can notice things for what they are and let them go more easily. I don't ruminate on them like I used to. And when I do find myself in a really stressful situation or realize that my amygdala is being hijacked, I have the awareness that it's happening, and I have the tools to get in front of it and basically shut it down before it completely takes over and ruins my day. So the moral of the story is, if you have a legal brain, one that cannot seem to ever stop, right? Like, it's always going a mile a minute, and you have a hard time really relaxing, or maybe you don't always have great perspective, or you're always on edge. I get that you might think that this is something that won't work for you, and that it's just, this hippie spiritual practice. But the truth is There's science and research from Harvard to prove that it literally changes your brain, and it can improve your concentration, your focus, your performance. It can decrease your stress, your anxiety. It worked for me, and so I always love helping others learn how to put that practice in place themselves. And so if you want to start a practice, again, this episode is not about that. We're about to wrap up. Maybe we'll do another episode on that later. There are a lot of ways to get started. Just remember that it's not going to be easy when you just get started. And it's important to try lots of different things. So in the same way that if you hate certain exercises but really enjoy others, do the ones that you enjoy. If something's really hard and you hate it, move on to something else. There are so many different techniques out there. So I'm going to put all of this in the show notes, but just some resources to get you started. You can go on iTunes or iTunes University and listen for free to Mindfulness at the Hammer. That's out of UCLA, their mindfulness program. They have a lot of great guided meditations that are mindfulness based. And we will talk about mindfulness. You can have mindful meditation, but not all meditation has to be mindfulness based. And so I think we will be doing an introduction to mindfulness, episode 19, I believe. So you can look forward to that. But Mindfulness at the Hammer, that is one resource. Another is to just get on YouTube and search for meditations. There's a ton of stuff out there, and you can just try them on for size. Deepak Chopra and Oprah Winfrey do almost monthly meditation challenges, so you can get into one of those for free. They release a new meditation every day, I think for like 21 days. And then if you want to keep them, you can purchase it. There's also an app called Headspace. And I think you can do a free trial, and then it's not too much money every month, but that gives you resources to a lot of daily meditations, and they really try to help build up your stamina on that. You can use what's called Insight Timer to help you just set a timer to meditate. I have a meditation playlist that I love on Spotify, so you can just check that out. And if you just want to play a single song from that, and again, just maybe relax, kind of like Savasana. If you have practiced yoga, you can do that. And then Gina Cho and Karen Gifford, they have written The Anxious Lawyer, an 8-week guide to a joyful and satisfying law practice through mindfulness and meditation. So again, that will be on the resource list. The show notes, you can go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/10. And then last but not least, I've actually recorded a free meditation for you to try. It is a starter meditation that works for a lot of people, not everyone. And that's part of why I just want to encourage you to have fun and try out lots of different things. What works for me doesn't always work for someone else. You just have to figure out what it is that you like. And so I'm going to give you lots of different examples and some books, some audios that you can read and listen to in the show notes. And then if you want, you can also download a free meditation that I have recorded for you. And that is at hustleandflowpodcast.com/10. Okay, that is it for today. I hope I have motivated you to at least check out meditation, because it can really improve your life in so many ways. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to connecting with you next week. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.